Redo of Healer is a controversial anime about a young boy who is chosen to be, I say young boy, he's like a teenager, chosen to be a hero, but he ends up getting the ability of healing, which lets him cure people's wounds, and in exchange, he takes on their sort of pain and experience before they die. This actually, throughout the course of the show, basically works as sort of an absorption type ability where he ends up stealing powers from other people, so he'll end up healing his enemies just so that he can get stronger. But regardless, due to his ability and his initial refusal to use it because of how much it hurts, he ends up getting kidnapped by basically like the human country in this world and is forced into literal and sex slavery, where he's basically like raped daily and forced to heal people against his will and take in their pain. And they also like fill him full of drugs and shit. So he manages to regain his sanity at the last possible minute and acquires a magical artifact that lets him send his mind back in time so that he can redo the previous events and make them work more to his advantage. Originally, he actually loses his memories, but then he regains them because of some world spirit or some shit. Honestly, thinking back, I don't think the show explains this in the fucking slightest. Regardless, Redo of Healer is sort of focused on his revenge against the people who wronged him in the original timeline, and also the people who wrong him in this timeline. It's a show that is focused entirely on the concept of revenge. We will talk a bit more about how this affects the narrative going forward, but we will talk about what I would see as the controversy of Redo of Healer, which is that it is a show where the main character is a rapist, where he ends up like raping the women who wronged him in the past. Notably, it is worth noting that in the original timeline and in this timeline, there are attempts. They also raped him, and in fact, every woman he rapes is herself also a rapist. Now, there are arguments you could be made that this is justified, a sort of like Hammurabi eye for an eye sort of thing. I'm not making that argument. I'm not making a counter argument. I'm staying completely out of it because, frankly, it's not relevant to this review. I'm just saying the facts of the show that everyone he rapes also raped him. You make your own judgments on that. I don't really care. Regardless, I will say that, ironically, the rape scenes in this show are the best handled sex scenes in this entire thing, because every episode of this show has a sex scene, and a lot of them are sort of just gratuitous for the purposes of gratuity. So at one point, he uses his healing abilities to, mind control the princess of the country, and then turns her into a sex slave, basically. And so every episode, we get to see him fuck her, and then he picks up a wolf girl slave, and then he starts fucking her. And all of this is in an attempt to, later on, try to seduce the demon lord, who he previously beat to send his mind back in time, who he's trying to befriend in this timeline. And also, at one point, he, fucks the sword saint that he's hiring. And, yeah, so there's a lot of sex scenes in this entire show. There's a good amount of rape. Rape in this show, arguably, except for, I guess, maybe when the main character does it. You can debate that, how the show is trying to portray him. I don't think the show thinks he's a good idea. But anyway, the point is, there's a lot of, gratuitous sex scenes in the show, and most of them don't actually add up to anything except for sort of the early parts and the rape scenes. Ironically, the rape scenes are the only justifiable sex scenes in this entire show. I will say that the show introduces the concept that absorbing fluids from heroes, not necessarily the main character, heroes in general, will actually increase the power cap of the person absorbing them. So there's a really brave scene in one of the earlier episodes where the main character, while he's acting as a sex slave, is getting a blowjob, and then he comes in this woman's mouth, and then the guy who's raping him in the ass, as the woman's walking away, is hold on, and he grabs her, and then they start snowballing his jizz. Honestly, I just think that's a brave scene, and I felt like I needed to tell you about it because I watched that. So anyway, that happens in this show. In the story, he has a habit of taking the women who've wronged him in the past, specifically the princesses specifically, and he'll wipe their minds and change their personalities, turning them into tools against the Empire, and also his personal sex slaves, one of which he made his little sister for some reason. I don't know fucking know. When he originally mind controlled the princess, I didn't even understand what this guy was going for. I frankly think this man is fucking flying by the seat of his pants and is making shit up as he goes. And I think he just found a convenient usage of happening to kidnap the princess. Because this man is not smart. He does not have a fucking plan. But regardless, we'll mention that the one female character that he did not turn into a sex slave, that he does not end up having sex with, is actually a lesbian who does end up getting... Now, to be clear, she drugs and rapes and murders women. So, again, do with that what you will. But he does drug up a bunch of dudes to give them, like, super aphrodisiacs that also make them cannibalize her. And so she's, like, the one woman that he doesn't have raped and, turned into his own personal sex slave. She just gets raped and eaten. And I like to think that that is the author knowingly trying to take a step back from having to address the fact that, like, if he turns the lesbian into a fucking sex slave of his, there's, like, some conversion therapy sort of shit you've got to deal with on that. So I think that was the author knowing to take a step off the gas pedal. And to the subject of the author knowing to take the step off the gas pedal, I will actually say that this show isn't necessarily a sort of gritty, dark fantasy. There are dark elements to it that are addressed, but the show isn't interested necessarily in delving into those elements beyond the fact of the violence and the rape. It's not willing to address the concept despite being a core element of the series. So I don't know if I would fully call this a dark fantasy. It's very dark fantasy light. Instead, the show is actually really just more like edgy teenage bullshit. But to the author's credit, unlike I think pretty much most other examples I've ever seen from this, I don't feel like the show was attempting to be a sort of nuanced dark fantasy. I think the author wanted to make edgy teenage bullshit. I think he fully succeeded at making edgy teenage bullshit. I think this was always the goal, was to make this. So it is also worth noting that it's not clear whether the main character is even meant to be a likable or sort of correct morally character. He's very reactionary, which is part of a problem about this, because he's super focused on revenge and not a whole lot else. Like I said, he's a real fucking pants-eater. This man doesn't have a fucking plan at all. And so he goes on these, what basically happens is the show runs into this formulaic issues where essentially the main character will be fucking around doing some random bullshit, then someone will wrong him, and usually this results in someone dying or his mom getting raped and murdered, and then he'll go on a fucking rant and he's like, well, time for some good old revenge. The whole show just jerks off the concept of revenge, basically. And because the main character is super reactive, he's also sort of less of a compelling character. The main character specifically states so in the show that he wants to save the world because it's one of those that's where I keep my stuff and my women kind of things. And when he acquires a heroic weapon, he does it for the purposes of domination. And then we see him when he has it laughing maniacally. He laughs maniacally a lot in the show. But then it cuts to the girls in the other bedroom listening to him just laugh maniacally in one of the most humorous moments of the entire show. Meaning that I fully think that the show is aware that he is just an absolute shitty scumbag. In fact, he actually gets called out on it by the Demon King for being a shitty scumbag. And he's like, I'm not a shitty scumbag because I think I'm a good person. And if you think something hard enough, you become that thing. And, that's one of the stupidest fucking arguments. So I think the show is aware that, one, it's not good. Two, that this is just edgy teenage bullshit and not a real fleshed out dark fantasy series. And three, I think it's aware that every character in the show, except for the Sword Saint herself, probably, and arguably the Demon King, are absolute irredeemable scumbags. So the show is trash, but it fucking knows it's trash, and it embraces its trash, and all it's really trying to do is be edgy teenage bullshit with a lot of gratuitous, I'm assuming it's attempting to be arousing sex scenes. And if we're basing it on the ideas of what it's trying to accomplish, I will mention that the first 3 episodes where the main character's being tortured and raped and stuff, and he's trying to plan his escape, and then he's getting his initial revenge on the princess, are the best episodes of the whole show. They were actually engaging, edge of my seat. From that point on, it devolves into just formulaic, oh, I'm fucking around, oh, my friend got killed, now I need to revenge, now I'm an edgelord supervillain. And then that's the whole thing. And so honestly, I wouldn't care if the show kept going. It really does devolve. But if we base it on what it's trying to be, I think it accomplishes its purpose pretty well. Twitch and Discord in the description. I've been Sacrobolic, your Envoy of Hope. Bye-bye.